Good morning. Good morning. A couple of notes from the stewards. One, could we have all telephones in the off position? And they've announced that any late arrivals will be ineligible for practice. I'm Brian Caldersmith. I'm part of the Australian Motor Heritage Foundation. And for those that don't know, we live in that two-storey building on the other side of the grandstand. You've all got your little A5 brochure there on what we're about, and I strongly recommend that you have a look at the website so that you can catch up to date with what we've been up to. This afternoon there will be plenty of time for Q&A, so as this is their first fireside chat, I'd ask that you perhaps let them chat away, and at the end, it's open slather. So without any more further ado, I'd like to pass over to Peter Robertson so that Colin Bond can start chatting.
Only one person has won both the Australian Touring Car Championship and the Australian Rally Championship. Colin Bond. Surely the most versatile of all Australia's motorsport heroes. You want further proof? Colin made a name for himself as a hill climber, scoring 3 consecutive New South Wales titles between 1965 and 67. Bond hit the big time in 1969, winning the Bathurst 500 alongside Tony Roberts in a Monaro GTS 350. More history was created at Mount Panorama in 1977, when Colin ran second to Alan Moffat in the Falcons' infamous 1-2 formation finish. Colin continued to race through the 80s and early 90s, taking on a variety of challenges in the ATCC and the ARC, while adding the likes of the Australian GT Championship, Australian Super Series and Australian Endurance Championship to his astonishing resume. When his track career ended in 1994, Colin was inducted into the V8 Supercars Hall of Fame in 2002. He was also president of the ARDC, awarded an OAM for services to motorsport in 1994, and later acted as a CAMS driving standards officer. There was also, of course, a fun side to Bond. At an Oran Park race meeting in April 1977, 17-year-old Sharon Myrne went looking for Colin in the pits. "Where's Bondy?" her father asked Harry Firth. Harry pointed to the legs poking out from under the car. Colin pulled himself out and Sharon asked for his autograph. Laughing, Colin put a greasy finger in her autograph book. Sharon told him, "You'd never see Brocky under a car like that." Welcome, Colin. First question, how did it all begin?
Well, you're talking motorsport only, but basically I think I always wanted to be a professional sports person. You know, it sounded pretty good to me that you sort of work on weekend and have the rest of the week off, regardless what you did, but it didn't work that way. But honestly, if we went back, you know, to the schooling days and everything else, we played a lot of football, cricket and so on. You know, motor cars didn't get involved until a bit later. You know, our parents never really had a car until probably I was about 15 or something like that, yeah.
How old were you when you learned to drive?
Oh, look, I guess it was one of those situations where we used to drive the car up and down the driveway at home, of course, you know.
What was the car?
Oh, Wolseley. Wolseley, bloody 840 or whatever the case might be. But anyway, that was, well, you couldn't drive anywhere else, but we did have some friends that had a property out at Glenorrhea, and you know they had an old Ferguson tractor or something which just started on petrol and went to kerosene. Yes. And we used to drive that all around the bloody farm, of course, you know, in and out the trees. But and it was something that you sort of take on a bit later, you know, because before that it was always push bikes, of course.
Right. Well, is it true that you rode your bike from Hunters Hill to Mount Druitt to watch the racing?
Oh, well, a mate of mine, Andy Frankel's father, was actually a member of the ARDC at the time, and he used to take us out in his car, but if he wasn't going, then we get on the push bikes and off you go, and you'd ride out there.
How long did it take?
Oh, not very long in those days, I don't know. Look, we used to ride push bikes everywhere, you know, it was one of those sort of things.
Yeah.
But it was just that I still remember sort of going to Mount Druitt. I mean, some of the people here have obviously went to Mount Druitt as well, you know. It was an old airstrip that you went down, but a bit of a hill and airstrip and a 44-gallon drum at the other end to turn around and go back the other way.
Yes.
But I always remember there was Don Gibson in a Dodge because my grandmother had a Dodge, you know, against all the Holdens and so on, and about 100 TCs turned up to race. I think that was about it.
When you left school, you became an apprentice mechanic at Grenville Motors, but you were also being paid to play soccer. Why didn't you follow a football career?
Well, I guess, look, I played soccer right from when I was 6 years old, and I was quite good at it actually, even though you only played, you know, Saturday comp or school comp. But when I was 17, I was offered to go to Alcoa, you know, and try out for them, and I did. But nobody spoke English, so I didn't think that was pretty good when you were 17. So then Arpio wanted me to go there, which all the Italians, of course, you know. So we went there, same problem, you know. But then the local team, which was Gladesville Ride, had all these old Poms that probably couldn't make it in third grade over there. So we ended up doing that. But we were sort of in the professional side of things in those days. I think from memory I was getting about £5 a week, you know, as a mechanic or apprentice mechanic at Grenville, and I was getting 3 guineas, and I'm sure some of you still know what guineas are, but it was £3 and 3 shillings to play on Saturday afternoon. So that was pretty good fun anyway.
Yes. What led you to the decision to buy a bug-eyed Sprite?
Oh, look, we're coming back from Bathurst after one of the Easter meetings, and in my mate's Morris 840 of all things, and the traffic was fairly busy, it always is, and this bug-eyed Sprite passed us and was in front of us, and I was looking at it and I thought, God, that looks terrific. There's a bit of me in that, and we had to follow it for some time before he pulled out and off he went again. But it took a while. It wasn't the first sports car. We had a Singer 9, mind you, because at Grenville Motors, all the apprentices had Singers. They were in the Singer Car Club, which I think was involved with actually Oran Park at one stage. Right. Yeah. Yep. So anyhow, but I didn't really fancy it, you know, just it had the cracks across the back like they all did. But we then bought the bug-eyed Sprite, and it was, you know, it was really good. Great for motor cars, great for club days, you know, club outings. Yeah. Okay.
You also drove a VW Beetle in the 1964 Ampol Rally. How did this come about?
Well, Andy and myself were going to go in the bug-eyed Sprite in around Australia. And Carl Kennedy said, no, you can't have a soft top, you know, because there were a couple of guys killed in one of the Reddixes, I think in a TF or something like that. So you had to have a solid roof. And my brother at the time he'd been to Duntroon, he went through 4th Street, Duntroon, and was in New Guinea, first thing he had to do with the army. And he sort of said that he was coming back to Australia and he'd like a car. And I sort of said, how about a Volkswagen? On one condition, that we could actually run it in the rally. So he agreed. So I would say my brother was probably one of my first sponsors. But this particular car we picked up, which was a 62.5 model, it wasn't very old, but it had been stolen and stripped. And they'd taken the doors and the wheels and trim off it outside, mudguards and things. So we just went around the wreckers buying all the bits for Volkswagens. Because one good thing about a Volkswagen Beetle is that they all fit the old mudguards, even though it may not be the same model. It was just the lights were changed, or the handle on the doors were the different. But so we built that, ran it in the event, won the crew under the age of 25, and which wasn't bad actually when you consider there was 3 of us in a Volkswagen, and we had a factory Volkswagen behind us, you know. And we could see who could drive the furthest before we got overtaken by it, sort of thing, you know, so it was a bit of fun to do. But look, you know, the Volkswagen kept on going. I finally gave it to my brother. He had it for a while, then rolled it over and it went back to the wreckers.
Right. Well, with the money from that class win, it helped you buy Bob Holden's Lynx Peugeot, your first open wheeler. And thanks to Peter Ulbrich, he's brought the car today, and it's downstairs if anyone wants to look at it. Colin sold it in 1969, and when he had not seen Peter again until today, which is pretty astonishing, I think. But why the links?
Yeah, I never was in the car before until today again either. Mind you, it was much better when I sold it to you, Pete. You know, look, well, Bob Holden was in the rally actually, and we were just sort of talking, and he was saying about the links. Not that we knew much about it at the time, but it was, a Peugeot motor in it and a Porsche gearbox, and it was supercharged. So we thought, oh, well, maybe it's better. We did race the Sprite, actually, I must admit. We did a few races, only the Warwick Farm Short Circuit and Oran Park and something else, but not much. It was only sort of a clubby type event for those. Then on the day that we went to buy it, we thought, now what you've got to do with these things, you buy them as they get off the racetrack. You never let them take them home, just in case they take all the good bits out. So we went to Oran Park to pick it up, and coming over the dog leg, it broke a back axle and the back wheel disappeared with the brake drum down the hill. And, he just skidded to a stop. So anyway, we got it back into the pits after the race, of course. Loaded on the trailer, took it home, and my mum and dad, Dad was working, so we put it in the garage, jacked it up, put a brick under the suspension on that side, put the back wheel against where it should have been, So when he came home, he wanted to go down and have a look at it, and he looked at it and he kicked the wheel and it went down the garage. I said, shit, it's a bit fragile, son. Anyway, but as it turned out, we didn't know it was a hill climb car. It was good because it was supercharged, I think, and it just had lots of torque. And we just took it to Amarillo, I think, hill climb. The next minute, we won that and set a new record. We probably could. So from then on in, we sort of, as you say, 3 times, New South Wales hill climb champion. Am I getting ahead of you, am I, Peter?
No,
okay. Right. And look, we had every hill climb record on every hill, and it got to the stage where they had to start bringing the finish line back because we were arriving so quick we couldn't stop after the finish line. And that happened on a lot of them, but we also came second in the Australian on a couple of occasions.
Well, second to Tim Shankin in the 64 Australian Hill Climb Championship.
He did, and I used to always say to Tim, I said, how come you got that ride with Enzo when you went overseas? Did you tell him that you beat me up the hill climb or something? But then Alan Hamilton beat me the following year. I think he had a Porsche and we were in Colin Grove in South Australia. And, we came second again. And I thought, oh, no. But, apart from that, it was always a lot of fun.
But tell us about its circuit record.
The links?
The links.
Oh, look, I'd have to think about it because I think we had about 27 or 28 races or something. We probably would have won about 24 of them. Really? Because it was a Formula Libre category. And that's when the AARC started, going back to actually cars that were, in classes that they're running overseas. So they got a bit sidelined, with the Formula Libre. So, but it was, look, you could go anywhere, you could race at anybody, I Spencer Martin's here, and I said to Spencer, when you're in your Brabham going down the straight at Bathurst, how fast were you going? He said, probably 171 or 2, I said, we were doing 165.2 or something, in the links, but we still had drum brakes on the back when we got to the corners and things compared to what they had. But anyway, no, it was a lot of fun.
Yes. And for a complete change, your first 2 Bathurst 500s, 65 and 66, were in Isuzu Ballettes, the same cars you used in rallies. That seems quite impossible today. What changes did you make to the Isuzu for racing as opposed to rallying?
What, legal ones or unlegal ones?
Well, both.
No, look, it was quite funny because going back to 64 in the round Australia, Arthur Trelaw was the car directly ahead of us, and he was in a Volkswagen, so we were with him and through him a lot. And when it was all over, he decided he'd buy a Ballette, and he said, well, let's go rallying in it. And I said, yeah, fine. I don't mind, you know, so I could navigate or he could navigate. Anyway, I thought it was his wife, but it was just his girlfriend, I think, Josie, and she would sit in the back of this thing and knit.
While you were rallying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, knit one, pearl one, whatever. And Arthur would say, "Oh, that was close, Josie. How was it?" You know, I'm sure she didn't have a clue. She mustn't drive because, I mean, in those days. But look, the Black was terrific, except the build quality on them wasn't that great in those days. You know, because we had to get through gates and things, and if you stopped, the door wouldn't open. You know, because, and so you'd have to get out the driver and open the gate and shut in, and then you'd hit a bump, and next minute the door would open again, you know, or the bonnet would open because it used to hinge from the front, and the faster you went, the higher it got. So you'd be sitting up in the car like this, trying to look, and if you hit a big enough bump, it would shut itself again and go. But look, the Black was okay. We went to Bathurst. The first year was. Well, we're going along all right. You really appreciated coming off the hill, you know, in a 1600cc car, because everything was passing you going up the hill. But anyhow, I came around the corner, pit straight, and the front wheel fell off. I thought, oh, shit. And they were the days when you had to go and get your own jack, your own thing, and all that. So I rush around, you know, get the wheel brace, get the jack, go to the front of the car. There's no wheel nuts. So I go and get the wheel, and the brake drum's still attached to that. So we just started back to the pits, and we got some other one from off another car, and off we went again. But we realised that we needed a bit more negative camber on the back, because it was independent rear suspension, and you could, you know, bit around corners. So the next year we sort of narrowed. Well, we put the springs under, you know, the press, and heated them up as you did in those days. And then loaded the car up off and went to Bathurst. And then go through scrutineering, because Barry Ferguson was driving a Bled as well. And he looked at our car and he said, "How come you got so much neggy on the back?" I said, "Oh, it's a rally car, you know, you know." He said, "Oh, but we went through all these springs, and, you know, so we've got a bit worried about that." So in those days, you had to take it to the scrutineers. So we had two guys on the back, lifting the back of the car up all the time as we went, so it didn't look as though it was that bad. But anyway, but look, you know, drum brakes, go down the straight, put the brakes on. You knew you weren't going to go straight. You either went left or right, so you just sort of worked it out from there.
You then switched to Colt, and Mitsubishi Colt, and won the KLG event, Mitsubishi's first rallying win, and you competed in the Southern Cross. Tell us about the 67 Southern Cross. Yeah,
look, what actually happened was that Mitsubishi started to get involved. Go back a little bit. Doug Stewart and Barry Lloyd and some of the boys, Mitsubishi brought out these two Colt fastbacks just to do some testing in Australia. So they did, and they did things around Australia, like just up the back, and they're out, and they had one of the Japanese with them, the engineers. And they left the cars here, and they didn't know what to do with them. They didn't want them back. And so Bob Ryan and I thought, well, we could make a rally car out of it, which we did. You know, we sort of... And as it turned out, they weren't bad. They were sort of not that fast, because they started as an 850cc and progressively got better when the Japanese got involved. But they were as strong as any. They would never break down or do anything silly. But I think that every year they come out with a new car, and it was always getting better, you know, from 1,000ccs to 1,100ccs, and then finally they went to 1,500. That was when they brought the Glance out, and that was probably the last time I drove for them, because that was in '69, and I think that's when Andrew Cowan and them started, you know, driving, and I introduced Andrew to the Japanese at our place at a barbecue, and then he went on to rally art, everything else. And I kept on saying, "Andrew, you should be paying me 10% of all this money," because... But he never did, being a Scotsman, did he?
Did you, throughout your career, ever give any serious consideration, given your success, of going to Europe the way a number of young Australians did?
Yes and no. I mean, look, looking back at it, probably in the early 70s, we did a rally in New Zealand, the Heatway Rally, and Hannu Mikla was there in a BDA escort, and we did the South Island and the North Island and some racetracks. And whenever we were on a racetrack, I was lapping them because we could put some decent tyres on, like sort of race tyres for that. But when we were on the road circuits, we could only run our ordinary old wobbly tyres, and they had some better tyres because they had more people there. There was only Harry, I think, and Frank Lowndes as our people to look after us, you know. But he said afterwards, he said, if I'd gone overseas, you know, I could have been in the top 6, you know, rallying. But I used to think, God, you know, the thing is overseas, what they do, they have pace notes, and you can only get onto the tracks when you're actually doing your pace noting and things. And it would take you some time, and you'd be behind the 8 ball, I think, until you sort of caught up with everybody that's been doing it for a long time. But the other thing we may have done, Frank Maddich, I think again in the early 70s, 71, wanted me to drive the McLaren to do the Australian Grand Prix at Warwick Farm, and then do the Tasman Series, you know, go to New Zealand, and then after that we're going to go over to America to do the L&M Series. Sounded pretty good. So he built his own car. That's when Henry Neobecky, I think, was giving him a hand, built the Maddich A50 or whatever it was called. Anyway, we did a couple of short circuit things at Warwick Farm in the Formula 5000. Hadn't done much in it, so I said, can't we take it to Lakeside or somewhere, or what, you know, or Surfers or somewhere, just so that you can drive it, you know, on a proper track. So we did. Tommy Nailard and myself actually went to Surfers, and we were racing against Formula V's or something, so it was really good we won that. You know, no, we just need to find out how fast you can go around the corners and things. And what I did find with particularly the Formula 5000, you had to get on the throttle. The earlier you got on the throttle, the faster you went, as long as you weren't wheel spinning or doing something silly. So we did that. Then we turned up at Warwick Farm for the Grand Prix. A lot of good drivers there, you know, Kevin Bartlett. There was a lot of overseas drivers, Surtees, Frank Maddich, Frank Gardner, I should say, as well as the normal, you know, mobs of Australia. And the first practice session or qualifying session actually was wet. And Frank said, look, I've only got 4 tyres mounted on wets. He said, I'll put them on my car and go out and do it, some laps. Come in and we'll put them on your car and you can go out and do some laps. And I'm sitting in the pit watching these guys come around thinking, oh, I'm going to be 10 seconds off the pace here. I could just imagine it because never driven one in the wet. So anyway, Frank comes in, put them on, and off I go. And I'm absolutely out of control, basically. I thought I was driving a rally car. And I'm going down, locking up brakes and getting around the corners and coming out with convincing all the time that I'm just 10 seconds off the pace. As he went and finished up, I was on pole. I said, thank Christ that, because I don't know how these guys drive any faster. But anyway, but the problem after that was that Frank sold the McLaren to Paul Radich's old man, and he said, look, you know, well, you won't be able to go and do the New Zealand, you know, round, and we'll build another car, and it may not be ready, but then it'll be ready probably to go to America. And I just looked and said, oh, I've only done one racing one. If I'm not going to do the Tasman Series, for Christ's sake, and you know, and then you go to America, do the L&M Series, you haven't driven much, and you haven't been to the circuit. So that's when I went back and drove for Holden, which I think was a smart move.
Yes, okay. So how did the connection with Harry Firth come about?
Oh, we used to beat him, of course, in the Colt Fastback when he was in his... No, not really. No, because rallying, he was rallying in those days in the Cortina, and he knew me from that. But it was when he got the flick from Ford, when Alterna came out, you know, and so Harry... Well, GM, I think, you know, from Bagshaw, and that sort of got onto him and said, look, you know, would you run the Holden team for us? And because up until that, I think McKay had been sort of linked into the Holden dealer team, you know, for the racing and so on. And so he sort of, I think Mike Cable might have been talking to him, and he said, you know, Ponty's done a bit of racing and been to Bathurst and all that. And said, yeah, okay. So he said to me, look, we're going to Sandown. I'm going to get Spencer Martin to drive the car. And you. And I said, oh, gee, that sounds terrific, Harry, but one problem. I'm committed to go to New Guinea to do a rally at the same time on the same weekend. And he said, oh, no problems. And he got Kevin Bartlett to drive with Spence. And Spence will tell you the story better than me, but it was a bit of a disaster because he backed it into the fence and it caught fire and he got hurt. And but it wasn't his fault,
No,
just
it wasn't.
Well, nobody really knows the right answer, but Frank Lowndes sort of said to Spence one day, not that long ago, he said, look, you know what I think what really happened was that they were putting the standard road pads in to drive them, because we used to drive them to and from the race tracks, with Harry's, and they forgot to put the race pads in. So the road pads are only good for about 6 laps or something. Yeah. Then they just go to water. But anyhow, and I'm pretty sure something like that would have happened, but Harry would not, nothing was ever Harry's fault. No. Right near the end, anything that was happening that he reckoned was our fault, and we said, no, it was your fault. What?
Always the drivers.
Oh, always the drivers, yeah, I know. It was like, it doesn't matter, it won't go that far, because there's I could be here all afternoon talking about Harry.
Okay, so you went to Firth. At that stage, were you a professional racing driver? Was that the way you paid the mortgage?
Well, sort of. We were professional. Harry used to keep knocking off all the money, but it was first time we were going to be paid to drive. And not only that, after Bathurst, we had a really good run. I mean, the next race we did was the Lakeside 1500, which we won. And then Tony and I did the 12-hour race at Surface. We won.
What would you get? What would Harry pay you for a race win like that?
No, we were just getting the prize money that was put up, by the circuits. And I don't think Harry originally was paying us anything. We were just living on prize money, but it wasn't costing us anything. Like you'd fly down because we had a TAA deal in those days and so on, and they'd stay at the hotel and all that sort of stuff. And I think you get day money when you're rallying and that type of thing, so you could eat. But it wasn't until a bit later on, almost about the time when Brock left, I think, as well, because that was a funny one that not many people knew about. But Peter went to Marlborough and said, don't give Harry the money, give it to me and I'll run the team. And Bagshaw, they found out and they said, I'll just get rid of him. And that's when he went to Guy and Hound off and so on, And so anyway, so we're there. And Bagshaw came up to Robin and said, how's that now that you're getting some money? And she said, what money? She said, oh yeah, now we've done it through Castrol. We can't pay you, but we've sort of through. Said, we haven't seen it. Well, next minute, Robin's on and saying to Bags, it's not on. And Harry kept the money. That was the trouble, So next minute, we got things saying you can't talk to Bagshaw and you can't talk to any of those people at GM because, But that was just Harry, and he was, how can I say it, he was quite brilliant when he was much younger, I think, and running his own TCs and things, because he would find things that were quite good in those days. But he was just starting to get beyond it, I reckon, when we were just about to leave.
You famously won Bathurst in the Monaro in '69. Tell us about the race, the Holden Dealer team. You've done some of that.
Yeah.
And that day in Bathurst.
Well, but typical those days. I mean, the boys would drive the cars from Melbourne up, and Ian Tate and someone, and they just sort of on the highway somewhere, we'd get alongside and put it into gear and both accelerate at the same time and see if the cars were the same, and they pretty well were. Anyhow, we get to Bathurst, of course, and it's Saturday was the only practice you got, and qualifying, and then the race the next day. So in qualifying, we were on Michelin XASs, And Alterna turns up with all these Goodyear race tyres, of course. And they were much quicker, you know. And anyway, I said to Harry, I noticed that car 1, which Hank Walters and Peter McEnroe was in, which was the original car for Spencer. And that, so but anyway, and I said they had some Firestones and they had it on, and Digby Cook had Firestones on, and Digby Cook put his Monaro on the front row, you know, like second fastest. And I said, Harry, can I have a go with those bloody, you know, Firestones? They've got to be better, you know. No cock, you know, you're going to no cock. And I keep on persisting. He says, no cock, they won't fit your car. I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, in those days, when you put the wide tyres on, but it was not a grey area, but you could roll the inner edge of the mudguard because otherwise the tyres, you know, would hit. And that had been done to the car 1, but it hadn't been done to any of the others. So we just qualified and were 7th fastest, I think, on the Michelins, and the second Holden because Digby Cook was up the front. And then as things got going in the race, we were running around, Pete Gager was coming first, I think. Moffat actually had a problem going up the mountain on the first lap, changing gears, which is the typical Ford problem, you know, the hopeless bloody things, you know, those phase 3s. Anyhow, so we just ran along with them, and Digby Cook was there, and I was there, and Pete was there, and oh, that's right, because Brownie decided to have a crash on the first lap going off the skyline and stopped most of the cars. But we were all through that because, you know, poor old Brownie in those days, he had a problem in qualifying because it was only running on 7 cylinders. And so he was back in the field a bit, but they found out the reason that night, and he was coming up through the field at 1,000 miles an hour like he did. Hit the bank on the inside and was squashed over that, and that was it. He was over. So anyhow, we kept circulating. And then at the first stop, I was staying in the car anyway, Digby put his co-driver in, so that got rid of his car. You know, he was really slow. And then the Fords all started having tyre problems, yes. You know, they're blowing tyres and going left, right and centre. So we were left in the lead, and everything was going on quite nicely. Bruce McPhee was the only Ford close to us, but he was also on Michelin's, the same as us. But he had a bit of a problem early in the race, so he was out of sync as far as the fuel consistency or problem's going to be. So we knew that he had to stop for fuel towards the end. We just kept going around in circles, you know, and it was fine. But I mean, the cars, you know, when you looked at the brakes, the pads and the size of them, you know, were nothing compared to what they run today. So you had to look after the brakes, you had to look after things. They were series production motor cars, for God's sake, you know, yes. And that was the way you won. But I think, look, just looking at Bathurst, even not so much today, but in our day, there was probably only about 6 that were going to win the race. And if all the others had trouble, it was easy, you know. And Peter was always arsey that way. All the others had trouble. Not all the time, of course, but some of the times. But look, it's just, that was Bathurst, you know.
Yes, okay. I've always rated your winning the only 2 Dulux rallies, 71, 72, in the XU1, as the best evidence of your all-round ability, especially when the opposition included the works Ford Capri RS 2600. The fabulous Dulux, for those too young to remember, combined rallying, mostly at night, circuit races and hill climbs over 7,000 kilometres. How does the Dulux rate among your favourite events?
Oh look, it wasn't a bad event, but I think the trouble was, well, the first one started in Sydney, and you went Oran Park, hill climbs on the way up, you know, and some rally stages, until you got to Virtue. I think we went to Surfers or Lakeside, I'm not sure now. And then you came back through the centre of Australia, well, not the centre, but, you know, middle of New South Wales, back down, finishing in Victoria. So there was a lot more rallying being done on the second bit. And I think the first one, David had an Alpha GDV, or a GDA, I should say, which was pretty quick on the racetracks, but he was hopeless on the dirt. And the next year, I think the second year, It just started in Melbourne and finished in Brisbane or something like that. And that's when David had the Colin Capri.
Yeah. David is David Mackay, for those who don't remember.
Oh, I thought everyone knew that. No,
They probably did. They probably did.
No, look, it was an event that was okay. And I always had to laugh because we used to make movies in those days of those sort of events. And often you go to a dealership and you put the movies on and have a chat to the people. And you don't notice some things, and then you'll get these questions from lady will say, do you always have barbecues when you're out rallying or something? Because any time you saw someone eating a sausage sandwich or something, but not really. But it was, there were two of those, and I won both, I must admit. And there were two rally crosses, the rally sprints, I should say, in Canberra. And we won both of those as well. The first one was just Nissan supplied some Triple S Nissans for all of us, and you use the same car to go up and down this hill. And then the next time was a beautiful road, and we took the Alpha race car down, the GTV, and put some race tyres on it, and did that. And it sort of, I really enjoyed the rally side of things, that's all, in hindsight, because I think it's the thing I liked about rallying, if you really, really try hard, you go faster, whereas sometimes in racing, you really, really try harder and go slower, which is annoying.
Yes. In late 76, you went from being a Holden dealer team poster boy to its number one enemy by joining Alan Moffat's Ford team and establishing the Ford Rally team. Why did you make the switch to Ford?
I got paid.
How much were you paid?
Moffat actually paid me $25,000. And this is when we had Carol Smith, who's an American that came out to engineer the cars that year. And then we got pretty good prize money in those days too. And what we did, we pooled the prize money between the two cars, and then I got 30% of the pooled prize money. So during the year, which we did in the touring car rounds in particular, of course, we had the best mousetrap that year, basically, and the Fords were coming first and second on all of them. So financially for me, it didn't make any difference if he won or if I won, because I was only going to get 30% of the two. But that didn't happen at Bathurst.
No, well, we'll get to that.
No.
You once obliged Edsel Ford, that's him on the left, by demonstrating your rally skills in a BDA escort. What happened?
Oh, look, we had a race meeting at Oran Park, and there'd been a rally that night as well. And so Moff and myself were at the race meeting, of course. John Dawson Damer owned the property next to the racetrack, and we'd all come back there afterwards, and then the rally team turned up, and Edsel said, keep me for a ride in the rally car, you know. I said, okay. Well, John's got a kilometre driveway, and then you come up the driveway and a big roundabout around, you know, past the house and back down again. So we did that a couple of times, and he said, but isn't there somewhere that's like a rally? I said, well, Raby Road's not, it's just down the road a bit from where we were. And in the old days, if you had a rally that started in Campbelltown, the first stage was up Raby Road. So I sort of knew it pretty well. So off we go down, and you turn right into it now, and it's not dirt at all, it's bitumen. I thought, oh no. And anyway, and the road goes over a crest now, and then there was a viaduct that used to go across the pipes, you know, the water pipes from Sydney. So I take off and I go, there's probably all houses here now, you know, and all that sort of stuff. And not only that, I bet you that bloody viaduct's not there. So I get going, woof, woof, woof. Over the crest I go, and oh shit, the road goes to dirt. And the viaduct's still there. So I'm arriving too fast. And the car's just going down the road completely sideways. At least I was facing the right direction. And at the right time I get the second gear and go, and fire it across the viaduct, without hitting anything, and out the other side. And I thought, Jesus, thank God. He says, man, that was fantastic. Can we do that again? I said, you don't know how close you came to being killed.
How did you react to Ford's 1980 decision to pull out of rallying, effectively ending your 4 years as the mastermind of a most successful team based around the Escort?
Well, look, yeah, it was... When we went to Ford, obviously, with Moffat in 77 and 78, I sort of said to Ford, I said, look, surely, you know, the rally, they brought some rally cars out to the Southern Cross Rally some time ago with some of their stars from overseas, and the cars all broke axles and did all sorts of things and didn't really go well at all. And I said, look, if they won the East African Safari, for Christ's sake, and they've been world championship, they've got to be good. So we got a car of our own to start off with, and 2 litre, and we just sort of made it. And Greg actually, in those days I had Greg Carr driving for me, but we were also doing the racing, and the event that Greg's won every time was the Canberra International event. And so he may have done one event before, but we had a problem with the back axle anyway, the bearings, but we could sort of change it, and the boys could change it. And then Greg actually won the event again in Canberra in the Escort. And you know, that's because he and Freddie could go out. They worked for the government in those days, you know. And I said to Freddie, what do you do at the government? He said, oh, I'm in charge of disasters. He said, what do you mean in charge of this? Well, when there's a disaster on, I notify the Prime Minister and let him know what's going on. How often do you get a disaster? Oh, not very often, you know. So they used to go out and just drive around the forest learning whether. I mean, Greg was nearly as bad. I think he used to count the number of fish or something in the creek or something for the government. But because we won that, they then got a bit enthusiastic, and so we sort of talked, and I said, look, can't we get a BDA, you know, out of England? And they said, yeah, we can do that. So anyway, they got in touch with Ford England. They said that we want 2 BDAs, one for Australia, one for New Zealand. And of course Ford over there saying, we're having trouble keeping up with Harry Vatten and all these sort of guys building cars, you know. But anyway, so they sent out the first one, which was IYK 000, which is still surviving. It's probably had, like the old man's axe, it's probably had a few more doors and handles and things, but anyway. And the very first event we did with that was we put Greg in it in the Southern Cross Rally, and he was going really good and winning, and then an alternator failed, and next minute, you know, the batteries are going to flatten. They'd have 2 Vardy batteries in the back and things, so it just became a little bit of a problem. But after that we started building our own and things, and that's another story.
Yes. You also raced the Alpha 75 and GTV, and even competed at Monza during the Italian Grand Prix weekend in an Alpha Sud sprint. How was the Italian experience?
Oh, typical Italian, you know, particularly in an Alpha, like, they're all mad over there, you know, and there's no rules. I think Enrico Zannarini was PR for Alpha in Australia and everything else. He was hopeless on the racetrack, but he was really good in Italy, you know. And when I say that, because we were going to the Monza, there was the Grand Prix on, there was got 200,000 people going to the same race, so there's a lot of cars going that way. And eventually you had to get off the freeway to go over this overpass to go towards the track. And everyone's sort of 2 lanes banking up, get off, but not us. Down the freeway all the way to the very end, and you're in. You're over the bridge, you're on the, you know, there's 4 lanes going on, we're making 5, you know, and all this sort of stuff. And I'm going, Jesus, Enrico, don't you ever get booked? And he says, no, I get chased a lot, you know. But in Italy, nobody cares. And the very end of it, he said, we're stuck. There's about 6 lanes going now towards Monza. And over in the gutter, there's a Fiat 500 with 2 wheels in the gutter and 2 wheels up the gutter. And he's going along, and he looks at me and he says, oh, Colin, look at that. Isn't that fantastic? Because he's beating the system, you know, he's getting on. But it was a lot of fun. We won the series here. There was an Alpha Sud series, and we won that. The first prize was to go over and drive the sprint at Monza in the Grand Prix period. I mean, it was a race for the cars. and we got there a week early, and they built a brand new car for us, and we were out at the test track at Alpha every day, which was fantastic because it's the one they use for the Grand Prix cars and everything else. They've got marshals on, you know, with fire marshals, and all the places they're supposed to have fire marshals. You're the only one there. Anyhow, so I got to know the track pretty well, and then we went to Monza. And Monza was a funny track because it's built inside a fenced area with trees.
It's a park.
Yeah, it was a pub, but
yes.
It sort of, originally, like when you go somewhere, you look and you go, oh, I know where this corner goes, but you just had to take a little bit of time to work out where you were on, you know, on the circuit. But there were 90-something cars that turned up for this race, and they're only taking about 36 starters or something like that. And I thought, oh, God almighty, you know. And I said to someone, Christ, there's a lot of cars here. And they said, yeah, I know, but it's getting towards the end of the year, so we've lost a few, you know. And you sort of think, what are they talking about? But anyway, so when we went to qualify, there was too many cars, so they put odds and evens out, and I was number 7. And so the evens went first, and then the odds. And just when we started to go, it just started to sprinkle of raining a bit. I thought, oh, God, that'd be right, you know. We've been waiting back there and now. But it was okay. And we realised that the guy that was on pole was car 1. So he's in the same as me. And I said to Enrico, when you go and talk to the bloody Thingo in car 1, because around Monza you can slipstream someone, and there was 2 seconds in it. But it was more than slipstream, you actually push the other guy down the straights. So both of you to work together.
Literally pushing.
Literally push them down. So this is Italian type. Anyway, so I said, you get him and we'll do this when we go out in the next session. So he agreed and he agreed. I said, great, you know, so we start off the next session, you know, and he's in front and I'm shoving him and he's shoving me, and then we sort of get to the chicanes before you go up around the Lesmo corners. I look in the mirror and he's gone. He's parked it in the bloody sandpit, you know, so oh no. So I had to sort of find someone else to get involved with. But as it turned out, we sort of qualified about 16th or something like that. And in those days too, at the start of the race, it was the old double chicane just after the start. And you sort of take off and 2 by 2 and you get to the first chicane and he crashed into you and then you crash into him and then he crashed into you, and you know, and you get through the 2 chicanes okay, then you go around, then you come back, and then the first chicane down on the back, I look up and the first 3 cars are having an accident and the others are joining in. And I thought, well, this is not bad, you know. So I come out in about 10th spot, and I thought, this is terrific. Except I had this guy in front of me in this bloody red car. And to this day, I'm sure he was pissed, actually, because, you know, but you know, the Formula 1 guys were in the pits. We were just in the paddock out the back, and all the people had their vino and their bloody, you know, spaghetti and all that you have, I suppose, in those days. So anyway, and this guy didn't go around any chicanes. He went straight through the bloody chicanes, nailed the poor bugger that was already coming out of the chicane. And I'd sort of back off and to find out what's going on. And I'd then get passed by 2 cars going up the next straight or something. So I thought, I'm going to have to nail this guy, which I finally did. And then you got the lovely bends, and then you're coming down before the big right-hand sweeper back onto the main straight. What's that called, Pete?
Oh, parabolica.
Anyway. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm just going to have to brake really late, you know. So on the brake, boom, boom, back through a few gears. He pulls out, passes me in full noise, and T-Bone saw poor bastard that was already at the apex. You know, I mean.
Okay.
but just cut a long story short, I was getting pushed a lot. You get pushed a lot, so you're on full lock, full correction, full power, and I broke an axle in the end, so I didn't finish. But like if it was in Australia, they'd be still talking about it in the stewards' hearings today. I mean, but nothing happened. Nothing happens over there.
In 1981, you were tempted to run at Le Mans with Peter Brock, Jim Richards, in a Porsche 924 GTR, but you didn't make the start. What happened?
Oh, what a disaster. Alan Hamilton, of course, being the Porsche distributor, and had bought many Porsches from Porsche, and you get the booklet with it, and you just set everything up the way it says, and away you go racing. So this was a 924 GTRS, which had only had the Opel motor in it. And anyhow, they were doing three of them. There was one for Australia, one for the Poms, and a French one, I think there might have been. So when we got over to Germany, went to Porsche and everything else, and the cars were all sitting there, and what had actually happened at the last minute, Porsche decided to run the 956s or whatever they were a day, you know, the proper ones. So they took all the race mechanics off our cars and put them on theirs, and we just got the people who were servicing the cars at Porsche to finish the cars off, I think. So anyhow, they finished it off, and off we went to the track. Everything seemed pretty good. Jimmy Richards and myself were walking along with the car when it goes through scrutineering. It's a funny place to get a scrutineering there. You've got to go back into town or do something stupid, you know, with the cars. The first guy puts a sticker on the car, you know, and he's an old guy. The old guy must have been older than me. And it's on an angle like this, and our car's immaculate, you know. I thought, oh, look at a wanker. It's not even straight, you know. And then you go to these things and they stamp it if you get it right, you know. And you just go and they check things and you stamp it. We get this one, the guy wouldn't stamp it. I said, what's wrong? He said, your toe ball at the front is not the right size. I said, hang on. This is German technology here. If it had to be 68 millimetres, it'll be 68. It won't be 67 and a half. And what had actually happened, someone had pulled it and had elongated it. So I said, give me a hammer. So pull, down measuring. Okay, stamp, you know. And then we go along a bit further, and we drained all the fuel out of it. We put all the fuel back in again. It's supposed to have 120 litres. And they put 110 in. I go, how come? You know, oh, shut up, Colin, there might be some hidden spots in the car or something we don't know about. Anyhow, so that was the first thing we thought. Then the last thing you do, they start the motor and turn the wipers on and everything like that. And anyway, the guy goes to start the motor, of course, and he's trying to choke it with his hand, you know, down here, the turbocharged. And when it starts, it goes put, 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 put. You know, I turned to Jimmy, you know, it doesn't sound like it's got 360 horsepower there or something. Anyhow, they finally get it going. And the guy turns the battery isolator switch off and everything should stop. Everything keeps going. They thought, oh no, you know, oh no, you know, there's a bit of a panic. They'd hooked it up on the wrong side of the switch, everything it was. But anyway, so we got all that. But we go to qualifying, and you only get like, how many hours? 4 hours, I think it is, of qualifying. And you've all got to have at least 4 laps in the car. So Alan says to Brocky, okay, Brocky, you take it out. So Jim and I are standing there, and the car's immaculate. We've got immaculate overalls on, you know, and Pete's in the car and they're going put, and every time he'd try to take off, he'd stall it because it was fairly high geared, of course, you know. And I say to Jim, I'm glad it's him and not me, you know, doing this. And then I said, I feel like I should go and roll in the dirt or something, or other, you know, to make it look. So anyway, off goes Peter. That was 2.5 laps. And no Peter Brock, no car. We're going back home. So we asked we had a little guy with us that spoke the lingo. Where's car 47 or whatever we were? It has stopped on the Mulsanne Straight. Oh, okay. Won't be any problem. But Peter could walk back through to the pits because it wasn't that far apart. We said, what happened? Conrod through the block. Oh, shit. It happened to the other cars as well, the French car and the English car. Well, that was the first day of practice. We'd gone, you know. So we had to take the car back. And they said, we got the spare motors from last year, which are bit different. We're going to put those back in the cars. Okay. But they took the intercooler apart and cleaned it because the shrapnel had gone through the intercooler, and the intercooler only pumped air; it didn't pump fuel. And the boys had cleaned the gasket or the whole thing out with petrol and tipped it out. And the next day, same thing again. Okay, Pete, go out and put a time down. And he goes out and does about 3 or 4 laps, and he comes and says, I can't change second in the gear. I can't get it from second to third. You know. So anyway, I said, can I have a go? So I get in the car, and for qualifying, we're allowed to turn the boost up a bit, right? So off I go, and I thought, 1, 2, 4. But you could go 4, 3, other words, like coming back through the gears, I went straight in. So I thought, I know what I'll do. You go 1, 2, 4, 3, you know, like that. And I started going all right. And we sort of got it fast enough to actually qualify. And, you know, I turned the knob. It's not boosting. I thought, oh, shit. So we put in the pits, and I said, the bloody thing's not boosting. And what had actually happened, the gasket for the intercooler, it got petrol on it, and it shouldn't have had petrol on it, and it sort of expanded and was leaking, you know, it wasn't going through it. So anyway, they put another intercooler in it, and they decided they're going to change the gearbox as well. So this is going to take a fair bit of time. They do that, and we put some qualifying tyres on the car, and Alan says to Brock, okay, Peter, you go out. He goes out and he comes in and he says, oh, it's the same, you know, can't change gears. At this stage, Jimmy Richards hadn't even driven the car, and it was getting late, and I said, Jim, look, this is what I did, 1, 2, 4, 3. So anyway, so Jim gets in the car, and he's got to do 4 laps, because if you can't do your 4 laps, you can't sort of race the next day. So off he goes. We're looking, here he comes. That's a bit slow. Oh, he probably went straight ahead at the end of the straight or did something, had to come back. Anyway, he did his 4 laps and come in, and he said, it's jammed in 3rd gear. So evidently the guy that did the gearboxes had the same problem with everybody. All the gearboxes were the same, so it was pretty well not much point. Anyway, only one of the cars actually made it to the race, and I think it might have been the Pommy car, I'm not sure now, or the French car, but it only lasted a couple of laps anyway, you know. It was just a shame, because normally, as I said, like, they're good, and actually Porsche felt sorry for Alan, because they ran a 944 at that same race that year, which was half a V8 motor basically, and they had 3 of them. So we got the car back, sent 3 of these motors back. We made it into a 944, which then ran in the series, the sports sedan series, and Alan Jones drove one of the rear-engine cars as well, you know, which was, and that was a lot of fun.
Yes. In 1990, when you were 48, you drove a Sierra RS 500 in the Australian Touring Car Championship and won 2 rounds. Going into the final, you were one of 4 drivers who could have been champion. How did the race evolve?
Oh, look, the Sierras were hand grenades, basically. I mean, they were hopeless. Unless you had the Edinburgh blocks, which Dick ended up getting out of here, but none of us got them. And it was okay until you got over 500 horsepower. Once you got over 500 horsepower, you started splitting the bores, because the bores in the standard Fords were thick, and then they went thin at the top, whereas Edinburgh had blocks made and they were solid all the way down. And the ironic thing about it is now all my cars running around have got those blocks in them, because a guy in England bought them all, and you know, you can buy them, and they made them much more user friendly, because like every one of us, you know, from Tony Longhurst and ourselves and Glenn Seaton, as soon as you tried to get a bit of horsepower, you know, you split a bore and the thing would just grind to a halt. Right. But look, you know, they were the car of the day. Yeah. you know, you sort of think out of 2 litres and things, you know, 500 horsepower and things, but it was easy possible.
Okay. For a time after your friend John Dawson Damer's death, you maintained his collection of Lotus Formula cars that included a 25 and a 49. Did this provide you with an opportunity to compete in historic events?
Yeah, but I used to do that actually before when he was still alive.
Did you?
Oh
Right.
yeah. I think I still hold the record around here for Group O on the normal circuit.
Group O.
Whatever Group O is in historics, right? In the Lotus 49, you know, which is the normal track sort of, and I had to laugh because John sometime later was running it here, and I said, "How are you going, John?" He said, "Oh, terrific." He says, I'm actually 3rd on the grid," he says, you know. He said, "Not only that," he said, "I looked down, and you've got the record here, and I was 10 seconds a lap slower." But anyone that knows John, but John said, "Look," he said, I like it when I'm not catching anyone in front,
Yeah.
and no one's catching me from behind,
Right.
and I can just sit here and drive around."
Okay.
So we ran the 49 quite a lot actually,
Yeah.
at the Grand Prix in Melbourne and things. And it was a good car because it was first of the DFE, which is the V8 Cosworth motors. Yeah. And we used to, you know, pull them apart and fix them as well. And they're an interesting motor. I'll just say to the technical guys here, because there's virtually no gaskets in a DFE except for the Cooper rings, which were sealing the head. Everything else is O-ringed, and when you think about it, it's all gear driven, you know, to the camshafts and everything else. So all the machining is identical. You could actually take a cylinder head off this side and put it on that side, and it would be fine. You know, no machining was ever done because you machine something down, then you've got to change the, you know, what the tooth things like. But no, they were terrific. And we had 3 of those motors, and there was one in that. Then there was one in the 4-wheel drive car, which, you know, John finally killed himself in, which is very unfortunate, because it was the only Lotus 63, I think, that actually went. The other ones at Donington in the museum. Yeah, he was going up Lord March's driveway, and it had been raining, and we think he could have dropped 2 wheels just off the bitumen road, because it was only a narrow road. And because of the 4-wheel drive, both wheels on this side could have been spinning, and just fighting back across the road and hit the barricade at the finish.
Terrible.
Yeah, but can I tell you one thing? Let me say one thing. The car I really liked was the Lotus 16. Now, the Lotus 16 was his oldest car, which was a 2-litre front engine thing that looked a bit like a van, well, you know.
Yes.
And I used to look at these great photos taken of, you know, in England of these cars racing, and they're doing the beautiful 4-wheel drifts. And I used to look at that and say, God, that looks good, you know. Anyway, when I drove it, I raced, you know, I think someone in a Formula 4. Anyway, you couldn't help it 4-wheel drift. It had no grip. I mean, it only had tyres about this wide or something, and the front was held on by the sway bar. But it was a nice car to drive because it was just so easy, and it had a selected gearbox. You went like they got these days. But anyway.
Across the decades, Team Bond has always included your unsung Robin, your wife. What role has Robin played in your success?
Oh, I think, well, originally, of course, you know, when we were holding everything else, they were doing the timing. It was the same with Dickie Johnson's wife and, you know, Pauline Moffat and all that sort of stuff, because the timing in those days with any of the people here were just done manually, you know, and even from the...
Yep.
And they were doing better timing most of the time than what was actually physically coming out of timing. So the girls would ask each other how fast, who's doing what, you know. But apart from that, I mean, eventually when we started employing our own people and things, she'd do all the paperwork, all the book work, you know, make sure everything's up to scratch, you know, organise all the airfares and whatever you've got to do to get people from here, there and everywhere. You know, and it's just one of those sort of things. I think it's just it's like, well, she's more than a wife, she was a secretary as well, I suppose, and all that sort of thing. So, and you had to make sure that, you know, you've done everything properly, you know, but anyway, yeah.
Yes. Enthusiasts are always arguing about the greatest drivers. Who was the best driver you saw?
Oh, look, I rate Alan Jones, actually. Not many people do in Australia, because not many people saw Alan drive when he was like world champion and that type of thing. But even the people he drove for in Europe in Formula One, Frank Williams said he was the best driver he ever employed, you know. And when he was going back to Beatrice here, we gave him an Alpha, you know, GDV, which was only a class car, really. And he would turn the bloody thing in knots. And I used to look, and Smithy, you know, and I would be watching this, and we say, you know, now I've got to go out and do something like that. You know, you look at the times. But look, there wasn't a lot, I don't think, between any of our normal drivers. No. You know, it was what sort of car you had at the time, you know. Yeah. And I used to always say, I think the car's 80% of the deal and the driver's only 20%, yes, basically, you know. Yeah,
still the same.
It's still, well, it's getting closer now because the cars are all closer, but I always think now it's the team with the most money wins.
Yes. You seem to have raced for almost every manufacturer and team. Who was the greatest to work with?
Oh, yeah, but we get on well with all of them, really, I think. But I think the best person to drive for was Alan Hamilton, you know. Because in those days, I mean, Alan being the Porsche distributor and everything else, he seemed to have plenty of money, and we flew first class everywhere. And you know, when we took the kids, they were first class as well, so, you know.
Goodness.
It is, yeah, I know, it's sort of, you know, Matty used to always say, he said, like when we would sort of go to New Zealand or something like that, and when with Castro at the time, or Caltex, sorry, at the time, and we'd be sort of upstairs in the Qantas thing, and she'd say to Andy, you see that button there, you press that, and the girl comes and she'll give you everything you like, you know. And she'd turn around and say, Mum, what class are the boys in again? You know, you go, no.
Did you consider yourself a rally driver that went car racing, a racing driver who rallied, or was there no distinction?
I don't think there's any distinction. You know, I mean, Jimmy Richards was good at both. I mean, there's no reason why you're not. A lot of rallies these days are bitumen rallies, particularly overseas. But I just think that... as I said before, the thing about rallying is that if you really try harder, you can go faster. And I think with racing, you've got to be a bit more of a robot, really, you know, and make sure you don't destroy the tyres and all that type of thing, and try and make things live. When we were sort of running around, I'm just thinking that when we had a collection of tyres we could use, and we always knew that the Bridgestones were probably the best tyre. And I'd say to Harry, you know, Harry, do you think those Bridgestones would be any good at Sandown this weekend? You know, oh, I don't know about that, cock, you know. Anyway, he'd then ring you up and he said, I'm thinking of putting Bridgestones on your car this weekend. To Harry, I thought, oh, really great. If you went up to Harry and said, Harry, I want to put the Bridgestones on, you'd say, no, cock. You know, because he had to make the decision, basically. Yes. That was his sort of in and out. But, I mean, Peter sort of, living in Melbourne, got a bit more of a Guernsey down there than I did when it came to the tyres. Mm.
What makes a great driver? Is it vision, judgment, concentration?
All that.
And
I think balance. I was sort of talking to Spencer about the other day. I said, you know, like, when you see all the motorbike riders, which is a balancing act, isn't it, for them, because they're coming onto the straight at whoop speed, you know, in a big drift, controlling it with the throttle, and don't put their foot down on it, you know. And I think it was the same when we were kids. We could ride push bikes, and you could do big slides and things without putting your foot down and sort of control it. And you do drive through the seat of your bum. And I just think that, and even Norm Beachy, I spoke to Norm Beachy about it one day, and he said, yeah, he said, I used to always like doing donuts everywhere and things, and I was really good at it, you know.
What are the cars the Bond family drives today?
Oh, very, very boring. Not boring, I suppose. I've got my Hilux twin cab ute, and I suppose It's the best-selling car in Australia anyway. And my wife's got an Audi TT, which is not bad. And I've got an old MR2 stuck in the garage, which was a Fangio car, but unfortunately it wasn't the old man. It was
one, no.
What was that?
It wasn't one Manuel, it was his nephew.
It was his nephew, that's right, you know, and Rick Bates, I think, and Peter McKay were sort of drove it at Bathurst and came sixth outright and won their class. And then John Dawson, Dame herself, ran it in Targa Tassie and were 13th outright. And there wasn't a single Ferrari ahead of us at the end, including the F40, which we knocked off downhill. Well, you couldn't beat it up the hill.
No. One final question. Despite all your success, you perhaps remain most famous for the dominant 1-2 finish for Ford in '77. Fast catching Moffat on the last lap, did you consider overtaking the crippled Falcon to win? And how do you see the race in hindsight? And the photograph, for all those people who know about these things, is in Adelaide, not Bathurst. And of course, that was a race you run.
Yeah, of course we could, yeah.
So Bathurst, not Adelaide.
No, but it's interesting this one though, because Dickie Johnson's, the Ford dealer up there, Brian Burt, said to me, "Can you beat him?" I said, "Yeah, of course I can beat him." But during the Touring Car Championships, I only had to come second because he was winning to win the series. And so I used to play around with some of the Holdens for a while and then just wave to them and say, "See ya, we're going." Anyhow, so we got to Adelaide and the championship had been won by then. So he said, "I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll give you a dozen bottles of champagnes if you can beat him." See? So I beat him and we got a dozen bottles of champagne, sent down everything else. No problems, yeah.
The 1977 Hardy Ferodo 1000 Classic from Mount Panorama with Alan Moffat virtually in a limping Falcon with a problem that the team won't tell us about, and Colin Bond driving toward us, just sitting in behind the boss, and that's the way he's going to run out this race.
Well, Alan Moffat might be nursing home a crippled car, but is going to be the leader of a crushing victory to Ford in what has been the most competitive, the fastest and the most international race we've seen here at the Mount Panorama circuit. Colin Bond pulls alongside. I don't think it's a threat to victory. I think it's just to line up the cars. Down the straight they go. Car 1, car 2. An absolute demonstration of the crushing victory to Ford here and the Alan Moffat dealer team. Moffat in car 1, Colin Bond in car. For the last time, they come down in that magnificent view from the 7 helicopter, a scene we've never seen before, side by side. Colin Bond marginally in front, but he'll ease up for the corner and let his team leader through, I would think. But he's in front at the moment. He's going to have trouble breaking here to let Moffat through again. Now he does, and Moffat from the outside will sweep around and take the checkered flag first for victory in the 1977 Hardy Ferodo 1000.
The winning pair, Alan Moffat and Jackie X.
Okay, so why didn't you pass him?
Let me go back a bit before, about the race, generally speaking. In those days, we'd get there on Wednesday and then there'd be a lot of practice on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or qualifying Saturday as well. Alan had Jackie Hicks come out to drive with him. I had Alan Hamilton with me. And so in practice, we going around and Jackie's sitting in the pits. And I said to Jackie, we take our car for a run if you know, they're both the same, sort of. Anyway, which he did. And there's some great photos of it in some of the magazines, actually, with his, you can see his helmet. And then he said to me, "Well, if I get invited back next year," he says, "I may as well come on Saturday. There's not much point coming any earlier," because in those days, Moffat sort of got in the car on Wednesday and didn't get out till Saturday. So anyhow, we sort of talked then about the race. We were up the front. We were two fastest cars, really. And I said, "Hamo and I can go to halfway." Because what you did, the rules in those days were that we could do it in quarters with the fuel load we had on board, but you could only drive for 3.5 hours, and then you had to have a time off, which is probably still the same today. But anyway, so I said, we can get to halfway in under 3.5 hours. So I'm going to do the first two stints. I'll get out. Hamo's going to do a stint, and then I'll finish off, because I've been driving the car all year, and Alan's quite happy with that. No. I'm going to start, then Jackie's going to drive, then I'll drive, and then Jackie will finish off. And I said, well, that's fine. But I said, that's the way we're going to do it. So anyway, off we go in the race. And we're coming first and second, and of course I was to stop first out of 2 cars. So I go out, stop, refuel, tyres, out I go. Moff's car's in, coming out of the pits, and I'm in front of the other car, see, and I think Jackie X is in the car now, and I thought, poor old Jackie's only done a few laps in the car, and the brakes aren't flashed compared to what he normally's got. Anyway, so I start pressing on, thinking I'll get away from all this now. He's still there. Oh, legit. I knew he was world champion and all that sort of stuff.
He was world champion. He was second twice.
Oh, was he? Well, he should have been. He should have been.
Yes, you're right.
Anyway, I said, Christ, I might even be holding him up, because... So I get on the straight and wave it past, and I look, and Moffat stayed in the car, and I thought, oh, you arsehole, you said you're going to get out, So anyway, off we go. We do that, and we stop halfway. 2 co-drivers get in, and off they go. And Alan said, what about when we get back in the cars, I get in your car, and you get in my car, so we'll be both winners on the day. Only one of the co-drivers will miss out. I said, I still don't think that was legal. You know how Peter did it a few times, but I think if your car stopped, you could get in the car as long as you were cross-reference to it. So I said, no, we came to come here first and second. So sort of knocking it back then in one little bit of hindsight. And not only that, while we're there, we heard whoever was coming third just broken down or something, so we're now miles in the lead. But when we got back in the cars, X had actually gained about a minute on Hamo. So I thought, oh, okay. So I get going, and Moffat's sort of just looking, keeping the same gap sort of thing. And what had actually happened, of course, that Jackie had worn most of the brake pads out, because he was braking much harder, and that's why he got very ahead. And then Moff got in and wore the rest of the brake pads out, then the backing plates, and then the front pistons. So he only had back brakes, if you know what I mean, and they don't stop very well on back brakes, only the bloody Fords. So next minute, I mean, there's still probably 10 laps more, 15, I don't know how many were there. I get 10 seconds. I gain 10 seconds in one lap on him. I thought, shit. Next one, another 10 seconds. And then Carol comes out with the sign, form finish 1-2. Oh, okay. Well, I said, well, financially it shouldn't make any difference. So, but I thought I'd better slow down now because it's going to look stupid if we just go around for 10 laps and behind the other sort of thing. So I slowed down and then just caught him on the last lap and everything else, And that's history, And Jackie said to me after, he said, oh, you're stupid. He said, if you're in Europe, he said, you just would have won. He said, how can they complain when you come first? But see, the deal, as I said, the deal was anyway, like the long and short of it was that in those days, first prize was 30 grand and second prize was 6. And I got 30% of 6, not 36. So it just didn't quite work out the way, but it did take me 5 years to get the money and 5 grand worth of legals or something from Moffat because he was a bit inclined to do that to a lot of people, actually, when you hear people. But apart from that, he was okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, if there are any questions, we would love to... We've run over time.
I'll pinch that, yeah. Thank you very much, Colin and Peter. I think a round of applause is more than... Thank you. A very successful first Fireside chat. What I should also thank too is the ARDC for the use of their Hinksman room. I think that has worked very well. And they have also supplied at the back counter there a whole supply of muscle car master programs with an appropriate photograph in them. And you're welcome to find one for yourselves, and I think possibly if you offered enough money, he may sign one.
I'm not Harry Firth.
Okay. So if there are any questions, I will ask if you've just a name and you'll need the microphone.
Yeah, my name's Peter Batt from Hills Car Club. Call me Batty. Tell us a bit about your relationship with George.
George Smith?
George Shepherd.
George Shepherd, oh Jesus. Well, some good, some bad. The first time I met George, we went to school together actually at Meadowbank. But the first time I did see him was at Mount Druitt, sitting in Jack Brabham's coupe of Bristol with Red X stuck on the side because George's dad was Red Shepherd and he was managing director of Red X Oil and the first person that actually put the Red X trials or sponsored the Red X trials, I guess, you know, which in hindsight really got me interested in motor cars. I think looking from the time back that the Red X trials was something we used to watch. I think you had to go to Cine Sound or something and see on one of those things that keeps going around in circles. But George was navigating for me. He was okay. Not the best navigator I had. I think Brian Hope was probably the best navigator I had. But that was early days. But George was fine. He won the championships with me in the XU ones because that's what it was in those days. I started making roll cages. This is how funny it is because when minis were racing, and then you had to have roll cages, and they used to get these Ailey bars which have come out of England, and they're only 1.25 inch aluminium tube with a bracket at the top just to clamp them and things. And we looked at that and said, oh, geez, you could do something better than that. So we started using, obviously, much thicker alloy tubing, much better clamps and things. And I did this in my mum's backyard, actually. We just had the pipe bender and off you go, bending pipes. And I'd got a guy that could weld them up for me, so I'd take them there and make some jigs up for them. And then eventually, when I started getting a bit busy doing more racing, I sort of said to George, you want to do the roll cages and things, and so you can, give me 5% interest or something, whatever it is. So he did take it on. He never paid me any money, and he registered Bond roll cars, which he then on sold to Peter Muir. So I don't know. I don't know if that answered it or not. Yeah. No more? Oh, no. Yes.
Yeah, good morning. My name's Chris. Bondi, it's great to see you. You never seem to change over the years. Two parts to my question. What do you think about the state of motorsport in Australia now, supercars and the other classes? And what takes your interest in motorsport now? What do you like to watch?
I still watch the V8s, I suppose, because I like sort of Charlie in Team 18. And they even had a win the other day. I never thought that was going to happen. I keep on telling to Charlie, I said, Charlie, your drivers are too old, because I think that's where it's all changed. The sport's changed a lot. And I think most sports changed now where the young kids are sort of coming through all the time. And I don't think anyone will stay in the sport as long as what we were sort of able to do. Yeah, well, see, he's just lucky. Oh, he's got plenty of money too. That helps. No, but look, it's just well, if I miss a Formula One race now, I don't care, sort of thing. I used to always get up and watch them in the old days and things. Well, not even old days, not that long ago. And we were sort of actually at Monaco when Alan Jones was sort of leading and then ran out of petrol at the last 5 laps or something. But I really think that everybody wanting the same equipment, which I disagree with, basically. I just think that the drivers don't have any influence on how the car's prepared or how the car's developed. You know, you've got engineers looking at all these wobbly lines and things, and they came back with the idea of what the car's needed with. I think the biggest, how can I say it, was like when we were driving standards, because everyone's got the same tyres, the same gear ratios, the same horsepower, same brakes. How do you freaking well overtake someone? It just makes it more difficult. And then you try and have rules, you know, where you've got to drive on the normal line and you've got to be at least up to the middle of the car before you can actually claim that you're there. Yeah, I don't think it's all good. I just think, and most people here, because most of them are as old as what we are, would agree that the best racing was done when we were younger. You know, I think it was, you had a car that you could modify, you could change the ratios, you could had a selection of tyres you could use, and all sorts of things. And if you made it go faster, then it was you that made it go faster, not someone else telling you what to do. You would get people, you know, like old Harry or someone who say, "Oh, Cock, I think we should put some stiffer springs in the back." And I said, "That's fine, Harry. What else did you bring to try today?" He said, "Nothing, I only brought the stiffer springs." You know, not really, but whereas at least when we had Carol Smith in '77, if we went testing, he actually had a program of what we're going to do on that day before you even got there, you know. We'll do this and we'll try that and then we'll try this and then we'll try this and try this. So it's a different game now. You know, in Formula One in particular, it seems to be the cars that are winning, not necessarily the drivers. It's, you know, the same ones keep popping up all the time in the same manufacturers. And it seems that the old Red Bull and the Mercedes and all that, and now the Alpines or something are doing okay. But it's not as good as it used to be. The last Grand Prix, you know, people who 1, 2, 3 on the grid, that's the way it ran and that's the way it finished. So nobody overtook. Yeah, and as for electric cars, I don't know where the future's coming. Is that because, you know, if electric cars are anything we've got, and you look at that Formula E, which is every now and then, and it looks all right to me, but it's got no noise, it's got nothing, you know, no atmosphere. So I don't know whether I've answered your question or not, because but, you know, out of, look, I still used to like Formula Ford and all that type of thing, and I thought they were great categories, and somehow or other they've all been moved to the state championships and things now, and not on the... Wait, you want me to stop the talk? Can I say one thing? That what I used to like about rallying, and the fact that when we could bring the world champion out to come and drive one of our cars, which we did on 2 occasions. You know, in the Southern Cross Rally, we brought Bjorn Voldegaard and Hansel Celius to come out when they were world champions. And he was terrific. And he broke an axle and still kept on going because that's another story. And then the next year, it was Ari Vatanen and Dave Richards came out. Now, we've still stayed friendly with Dave, who ran the Subaru Rally team, the BAR Formula One team, chairman of Aston Martin, just goes on and on and on sort of thing. Now, when they came out, you know, we'd competed against Ari down in Canberra a couple of years prior, and he was in an escort and we were in the escorts as well. And I was actually quicker than him on all the bitumen stages, you know. And there was a movie made, which some of you have probably seen, called 40 Split Seconds. And when Harry saw it, he says, "Oh, Colin, your car had much more grip than mine." I said, "Of course I did. We had better tyres," you know, and that sort of stuff, you know. So anyhow, when he came to drive for us, you know, and Harry's got a reputation of crashing, you know, and in Europe they don't seem to mind if you crash as long as you crash when you're leading. So he said, "Now, Colin, if you want me to drive at 10 tenths, I must have a left-hand drive car." Yeah, no problems, you know, we can make a left-hand drive car because all the bits from escorts, you could get the bits, you know, there are no problems. And so we made the left-hand drive car. And then when he came to the factory, you know, with David, he said, he sat in the car, he said, I'd like my seat a bit higher. It's, you know, I like to see over the bonnet. Yeah, no problems, you know. And then David gets in and he said, look, I want my seat as low as possible and more towards the centre of the car. See, I said, no wonder they're world champion, because it's a rear-wheel drive car and he's trying to offset the fact that Harry's up there and he's down here, right? And you know, when I finally sort of get to say to David, well, why do you like being back there? He says, oh, I just want to be as far away from the accident that we're probably going to have.
Thank you, Colin. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending our first Fireside chat. We'll be holding more at all sorts of infrequent intervals. As we close, you might like to go downstairs, because Peter Ulbrich has brought that Lynx Peugeot and it's downstairs for you to look at if you wish to. Thank you all so much.